So yeah, today we are going to kind of compare a prophet to the third base coach. And if you get the Friday email, you heard that I played softball when I was growing up, and I played third base. And I had this little game that I would try to play with myself and try to figure out what the third base coach was saying with all of his signals or her signals to the batters and to the runners, so that I could kind of maybe get one up on them, be prepared for maybe a ball that would come to me. You know, that third base coach, that their responsibility is to give instruction to the players that are coming up to bat or are on base. But that third base coach has a connection to the head coach or the general manager that's in the dugout. Before the game even starts, that third base coach knows the game plan, understands the strategy that the team is going to undertake. But then on the field, that third base coach has to make some decisions based on what he sees, where the outfielders are, as he understands who the pitcher is at the mound, and as he sees which players are still on base. These third base coach people are like those messengers, and yet make their own decisions as well. Well, there's a sports writer by the name of Zach Koenig. He lives in Minnesota, and a few years ago, he wrote about coaching baseball with his dad in a youth league. And his dad was always the first base coach, and Zach was the third base coach. And Zach writes that his dad would make a lot of decisions over on first base, but it seemed that any decision that Zach made on third base was always under scrutiny. If he sent a young kid to home and that kid got out, then the crowd would be upset and the parents would roar. People would remember those bad decisions that Zach made. And then he wrote about the third base coach currently at the Minnesota Twins, Tommy Watkins, who is quite an aggressive third base coach. He loves the windmill. And he's sending the players all the time, even those who have lead feet. He likes to send those runners. He's aggressive with trying to get those runners across home plate. And other than the umpire, Tommy tends to be the person the fans are most mad at in the games, in the Minnesota Twins games. There can be a lot of dislike, a lot of questioning, and a lot of booing that comes toward the third base coach. So it is with our prophets, right? They have this game plan. They understand what God is wanting them to say. They get a sense of what God wants for all of creation, and especially for the people that God calls his children, the people of Israel. And those prophets, while they know the game plan and they hear God speak to them, they also understand the landscape of what's going on, and they know who they need to talk to, and they know how to talk to them. They make some decisions maybe about their delivery. And for those of us on this side of history, as we look back at the prophets and read them, we may be the ones who have some questions. We kind of dislike some of the things they're saying and proclaiming. We may even want to boo these prophets. Now, as a reminder, as we are talking about the minor prophets, we're not talking about minor leaguers. These aren't the sub-prophets, the ones who are just practicing their craft until they become a major prophet like Isaiah or Jeremiah. It's just that they prophesy in a very succinct time for a succinct matter, maybe just to one person or one situation. So we hear from Zephaniah today, a minor prophet, who spoke in the southern kingdom. So just a reminder, we had a divided kingdom for a while, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom in the 700s BCE were taken over by the Assyrians. They were decimated. People went into exile. There was no longer the northern kingdom. And Zephaniah is a prophet to the southern kingdom, about 75-ish years after the northern kingdom fell. Zephaniah was a prophet during the time of King Josiah. And King Josiah was considered to be one of the greatest kings, like maybe second to King David. King Josiah was a reformer. He looked at what was going on, and he looked at the words of Deuteronomy, what we call Deuteronomy, the law of Moses, and was trying to reform the nation, especially the temple workers or the priests, the religious leaders of the time. The thing is that what we know is that King Josiah took the throne when he was 8 years old. So how he did this ruling, how he did this reforming, we don't have a great sense on, except that we know that children are very wise sometimes, right? But all this reformation that's going on in Jerusalem and within the temple, there's still war and conflict and division that is happening all around the southern kingdom. The Assyrians, the Egyptians, then the Babylonians are all coming in and trying to lay siege, trying to take the land, this precious space that Judah occupies. And all of this fighting and all of this conflict, and even within all this reform, there's this desire among the religious leaders to kind of acquiesce to the other nations. They want to know God, and they're talking about the God of Israel, and they're preaching the God of Israel, and they're observing the feasts and the rituals. And yet at the same time, they're worshiping the gods of these other nations. This is what King Josiah was trying to bring about, trying to reform. And so Zephaniah comes on, and he's prophesying to the same people that Josiah is trying to reform. And Zephaniah has these oracles of judgment. And so we hear over and over in the book of Zephaniah, the day of the Lord is coming. The day of the Lord is going to be horrible. It's going to be rough. It's going to be harsh. This warrior God is going to come in and decimate the evil. And it is not going to be comfortable. And it's going to tear apart the peoples. Now, for us today, when we read these prophets and we hear these kind of words, we get some imagery in our mind, don't we? Like, we are imagining that God is this wrath-filled God who's very angry and who's going to destroy people and destroy places. I think that's kind of what we want God to do, actually, and that's why we interpret it in that way. I mean, let's just be honest. We are people who kind of want to see those who are doing wrong suffer consequences. Or is it just me on the interstate when someone goes flying by me and then I see them stopped by a policeman that I'm not going, yeah, yes. We are a people who tend to want to see that when evil is eradicated, that it's evil people, it's evil systems, it's evil places. But what Zephaniah is actually saying to us is, and to the people of the time, is that inside each of us, there is indifference, there's complacency, there's complicity, that there are times in which we are not who God created us to be, and that we will stand on at the day of the Lord, a time that we will be judged. Anne Lamott, who is a great writer and theologian, and she has a quote that says, we can safely assume that we have made God in our own image when it turns out that God hates the same people we hate. We have been conditioned to think that the day of the Lord, this coming time when God comes to judge, that it is going to be a time of trial and tribulation for those who are left behind, right? For those who are not raptured, for those who are the unrighteous and the evil. But Zephaniah says, actually, God is going to come in, yes, like a warrior, but a warrior with love. A warrior who is going to come in and take away from all of us that which separates us from God. That which we have either created ourselves or just that we hold on to, but that God with love is going to destroy that part, that indifference, that those things that we just hold on to, that we want to do ourselves or be independent about. Because that day of judgment is meant to bring calm and unity. It's meant to bring peace and hope. And this is what Zephaniah prophesied to the people who were sorely afraid because they saw what happened to the northern kingdom. They knew that they could be, wiped away. And so there was fear about who God was. And so Zephaniah in that 3rd chapter turns his oracles to one of celebration. Sing, O Israel, shout with exultation. Your God is coming with love and calm and peace, and you will be made whole, and all the nations will be made new. This is the God of love. Now, us Christians today, we think that and believe, and rightfully so, that these prophecies that were given seem to be manifest in Jesus. Because remember, the prophets had the game plan. They understood where God was going in history. And so when Jesus arrives, and Jesus is talking about the day of the Lord, he's talking about the day when the blind will see again, when the thirsty will have something to drink, when the hungry will be fed, when the captives will be set free, when all will find peace in the day of the Lord. When Jesus came, he was the fulfillment of love and peace and hope. So we do not need to be afraid. We do not need to be afraid of the time when God enters into our midst and calls us to account, when God enters into our lives now and says, I want you to get rid of this, or let me take this off of your heart so that you can be whole. Because then we can go into the world to be that love and that calm, that peace and grace. And so we listen to the prophets. Not to be afraid, but to be strengthened, to be restored, to be reformed, and to go forth in the world and proclaim peace. Thanks be to God.